Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this holiday hack for 2022, we're going to be going over part 5 of our series of traits of successful leaders. If you're just joining us for the first time, please go back and listen to the first 4. It is worth it. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the fact that successful leaders, they have humility. They are humble people. And what that means versus what it doesn't mean, because I think a lot of people out there think it means something that it doesn't mean. So I really like this one.
Yeah, me too. The more we can talk about this topic and in general, just how leaders can continue to be self-aware, reflect, to learn, to grow, to be open to the things that we do well, to be open to the things that we need to improve on, to be able to, sense the nuance of a moment, and when people need to be directed, when people need to be heard, when people need to be seen, like all this type of dialogue, I think is packaged into, I think, leadership, humility, and the ability to lead people, to the best of our ability.
Yeah, I heard something once about humility that really resonated with me, and I try to remember this because this is where I think it gets hard for some leaders. Humility is not thinking less of ourselves; it's thinking of ourselves less. And what that means is, you ever get accolades for something? Someone comes up to you and says, "Good job on this," and you say, "Oh, it was nothing." Yeah, it's okay. It wasn't a big deal. That's thinking less of ourselves, and that's not humility. That is, maybe you were uncomfortable with the situation, you were uncomfortable getting the accolades, whatever it is, that's not humility. Humility would be saying, hey, you know what, I really appreciate that you calling that out because that was something that my team really worked hard on. Let me tell you the specifics of that and which people on my team did which things, because I think they would really appreciate it if you went up to them and gave them the same accolades that you're giving me, and kind of letting those accolades trickle down a little bit to the people on your team from whoever's giving you those accolades. That's what humility is. It's accepting the compliment and then making sure that there's clarity around who did what in order to get that work done if it was a team effort. And if it wasn't a team effort, if it was truly something you did. If I say, hey, Lorenzo, really great job on holding this person accountable for getting this work done. They were not doing this well, and now they are doing it well, and I've seen that you've had several conversations with them over the past month, and now they're doing it well. So really great job on that. It's not saying, oh, it was not, it's my job, what can I say? No, it's, hey, I really appreciate that. That was a tough nut to crack, and we got through it together, and I'm really proud of this person for being able to make those changes and doing what they can. So you own the accolades, and you pay it forward in a way that says that that you don't live on this earth alone, and that a lot of what you do can be attributed to the work of other people as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good call out, and I think why it's a great topic to discuss is because there's a balance. I've talked about this a lot recently. Like, there's a necessity for elements of ego. Like, you have to feel confident in what you do. You have to feel that you're able to accomplish things. You have to feel that you're like, if I just got my shot, I can do it, right? Like, you need these things that are going to help to drive you and to push you into spaces where it may be uncomfortable or maybe new territory, and you've got to take the first step into an area or a space of responsibility that maybe you've not had before. And ego can be very, very helpful in those types of spaces. And so I tend to hear a lot of, like, it's either you're egotistical or you're humble. And it's just like, no, like that's not actually, what that is. And the humility piece and kind of what you're talking about is, I believe it's really about establishing relationships with your team and your peers and coworkers and bosses where you're willing to admit when you're wrong, you're willing to admit when you made a mistake, you're curious about things that you don't understand, you're willing to raise your hand in a meeting and say, you know what, like, maybe it's just me, but like, I'm struggling to understand this concept, or I could use some help to better understand where we're going with this. Or learning from your team. Like, it's this idea of what I view as kind of being a lifelong learner and really being curious and not taking yourself too serious, and being able to people understand that you're perfectly capable and fine, and you have a great amount of confidence to get the job done, but that you're also someone who appreciates and respects learning, and that you ask questions when you don't know things and you admit the things that you don't know. And these are all really, really important behaviors that I believe then allow people to maybe look at you and say, like, wow, this leader has humility. It's one of those things that I think cannot be self-assigned. You don't get to say, I'm a humble person. Your behaviors and what you do and how you do things is then what allows people to then assign you as someone who is a humble person or has humility.
Yeah, I think the other element of humility here that is less about accomplishments and accolades, and I think it's more about whether leaders put the needs of others ahead of their own needs or what would be better for themselves too.
Yeah, I think it's a great call out, and it opens the door for a question that I want to ask you. So the question I want to ask you after we get back from this break is a time when you had to put the needs of others before yourself. But first, a quick word from some of our sponsors. Okay, so Chris, I want to ask you about a time when you had to put the needs of others in front of the needs that you had for yourself.
Yeah, I can remember this one very vividly. I remember being told when I took on my first kind of management role in an organization, and I was responsible for writing the schedule for all of the leaders, so for myself and my peers. And I remember thinking when I was told that I was going to be responsible for doing this, in my mind I was like, wow, I'm the newest member of this leadership team, and I'm the one who's getting to do this. Talk about like power, like, oh my gosh, like I was worried that I wasn't going to get the days off that I wanted. I was worried that I wasn't going to get the schedule that I wanted. If I'm writing the schedule, this is going to be easy. And right in the middle of the very first time I did it, I was like, I see why I was given this responsibility. And that's because I wanted so much to make sure that people never thought that I was taking my responsibility of writing the schedule and using it to give myself all the easy days and the easy shifts and giving all the hard ones to other people, that I went out of my way to give myself the worst days and the worst shifts because I was so worried that people would think that I was doing the opposite, that I kind of went too far in the other direction. And it kind of became how I worked in that space. And I did that for over a year, where I had all these the worst shifts and the worst days, and everybody else. And by the way, nobody ever called out that I was doing that, but I got plenty of thanks for the people who come to me all the time. Oh, the schedule you made for me for next week, that's a great schedule. The more you can do that, the better. I love that schedule. I'm like, great, thanks. Thanks. I do what I can, and in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, when do I get to like put this on somebody else to make the schedule? Because all I feel myself doing here is giving myself the short end of the stick, because I want to make sure that people understand I'm not putting my needs above them. And I think that was one of the kind of the first times I realized that I really try to be a humble person, but it has to come in the actions. It can't come in just saying that you are. People have to kind of assume that you are by the action you take over time.
Yeah, no, and I think that's that to me is always the lesson there. Is I think that when you raise your hand to become a leader, it's just one of the things that I always tell people of like, well, if you've raised your hand, I want to be a leader. So now you are now directly responsible and accountable for the development, the inspiration, motivation, direction of other people. And so by default, that means that you should be living and or working in like this idea of service, right? But that's because that's what a good leader is to me. I think that there are, those that want the responsibility because it provides a level maybe of authority or of power, of decision making, of feeling like if I have the job, I can now influence the decisions that are made, which will be decisions that I more agree with, and or will make my ability to get the work done that I want to get done easier. But then I think what ends up happening is now you come to that kind of that crossroads of that dilemma of making decisions that are they good for you, or are they good for the team, or are they good for the business? Or is there a place of all three? Is this one of those like pick two of the three scenarios that we get to see on every YouTube, TikTok video? Or is there actually truly a middle ground of spaces that can work? And I think that to me is the real element of like longer term leadership development is you start to see these things kind of always circling together, and that you realize you're making decisions that are not very rarely at the center of everything, but are just slightly skewed one way or another direction. And over time, the idea is that your decisions aren't jumping to the extremes of one of these maybe 3 points of the triangle, but they're just kind of swaying a little bit as you know that this decision or this strategy or this thing is going to have a more positive impact on one of the 3 things. And then again, from a humility standpoint, sharing that you even struggle with some of those decisions, letting people know, hey, this is a tough one because I know what I'm being asked to do here, or I know the decision that has to be made, or I know that I have to deliver this message, or that we're going to have to do this thing, and we have to do it. We absolutely have to do it. But this is tough for me as a leader. Like, I'm struggling with just, making sure that I want you all to know that that I want to make the best decision here, or I want to align with a strategy that's been given to us. But I also know that this may, to your example, this may change your schedule. This may ask you for different times to work. This may be a monkey wrench in some of the plans that we've made. And we need to do this. But I want it to be known that these are those moments in leadership that can be difficult, because you all know that I would want this to continue this, plan that we've got in place, but I have to adjust it based upon other needs that are going on, or requests that we're being given.
Yeah, this is where it comes down to sharing the story about what made you make the decision becomes so important too, because the people will fill in their own story in the absence of you giving them the story. And if it's a person that if you have a long track record of making decisions that are in spirit of what's best for your employees, then a lack of filling in the story, you may get away with it once or twice because people will assume positive intent from you. But it won't happen all the time. How our brains are naturally wired are to write a story in our head to fill in the blanks that will almost certainly be not as good as what in actuality happened. And so anytime you have to make a tough decision where you have to put the needs of either yourself or the needs of the business ahead of your people for any reason, being able to root that in the story of the process and how you got there is going to be incredibly important if you want people to not tell their own story and instead actually give you the benefit of the doubt when it comes to making decisions that may not impact them as positively as they might have hoped.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this holiday hack. This is Hacking Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.